Government Code is amended. I call an order meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Austin Independent School District for Monday, October 1st, 2012 at 6:20, the official AT&T time, 6:20 p.m. The board may meet in closed session to deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, dismissal, reassignment, duties, discipline of a public officer or employee, including the superintendent's evaluation, deliberation of the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, deliberation of negotiated contract for prospective gift to the district, deliberation about commercial or financial information that the board has received from a business prospect, deliberation of the offer of a financial or other incentive to a business prospect, or enter to consult with legal counsel regarding pending or contemplated litigation, or under 7 offer, or in a matter which the school district legal counsel determines should be confidential in accordance with Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code, Sections 551.074, 551.072, 551.073, 551.087, and 551.071, respectively. Welcome, everybody. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Yes. I so move.
Second. All in favor of that motion, please raise your right hand. Passed unanimously. Thank you, board. We have the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
And we have several items on the agenda. We'll try to move through them as quickly as we can. We're going to start with the AISD Internet Safety Plan. Dr. Striffen, straight to those guys?
Yes, I'll just skip all the...
Mr. Hauser, let's go.
It's my pleasure. Good evening, Board President Williams, board members, and Superintendent Karstarf. And my name is Michael Hauser, and I'm the Chief Human Capital Officer for the district. Joining me this evening is Dr. John Alauni, who is our Executive Director for Technology. We appreciate the opportunity this evening to publicly review the district's Internet Safety Plan. First, please be reminded that the district's Internet Safety Plan is required as part of Board Policy CQ. And second, if you would, if our Internet Safety Plan must be in place to be eligible for E-rate discounts, meaning that the plan must also be in compliance with the Neighborhood Children's Internet Protection Act, the Children's Internet Protection Act, and Protecting Children in the 21st Century Act. The purpose of the Internet Safety Plan is to implement procedures that provide for the safety and security of all users of the district's technology resources. Security measures include monitoring online activities on the district's network, restricting access to materials that are harmful to minors, and annually educating all users on district policy and acceptable use guidelines with emphasis on ethical and safe use. So with that in mind, Dr. John Alauni, our Executive Director for Technology, will now discuss some of the specific elements of the Internet Safety Plan, including standards and guidelines, after which time we will encourage questions and comments as necessary. So Dr. John Alauni, our Executive Director for Technology.
Good evening, Board President Williams, board members, and Superintendent Dr. Karstarf. This evening I would like to go over the AISD Internet Safety Plan with you. There is no doubt that the Internet is a valuable resource for education. It's a powerful tool with many benefits. It's a huge library of resources accessible at your fingertips. It provides access to people around the world, creating a far-reaching virtual reality, sometimes full of opportunities and excitement. And it serves as a creative outlet for writing, science, and art. But like any tool, it can be misused and abused. And just like in the real world, the virtual world has risks and threats that must be managed appropriately to harness its immense power while keeping everyone safe. So the Internet Safety Plan implements procedures that provide a balanced approach by addressing the safety of all users. The plan ensures that all users must be secured and protected by strong firewalls and network security systems to establish a robust, safe zone for all users so intruders do not access our students or compromise our data systems. It emphasizes the monitoring of network activities at any time and when possible by designated staff to prevent inappropriate and unlawful activities such as cyberbullying or identity theft. It also restricts access through internet filters to inappropriate content. It emphasizes the strict adherence to the Children Internet Protection Act guidelines, CIPA, which calls for restricting access to materials that are harmful to minors. It focuses on educating our users, students, and parents about the online risks and how to deal with them, and on awareness with the acceptable use guidelines and safety policies. So this is not new to AISD. AISD has many instruments that have been put in place for some time to ensure online safety of our students and staff. The safety plan connects them in a more cohesive way to better train and educate our users and community. So these instruments include the CQ policy, which establishes the standards for acceptable use of the district technology resources. It also includes the acceptable use guidelines that further explains the appropriate use and the inappropriate use and the consequences. The computer equipment safe use standards, which addresses the safe use of equipment, wireless connections, and alteration of equipment. It includes the district content filtering policy, which outlines the district filtering of incoming and outgoing internet traffic through the network. The district process to block and unblock a website, which describes the process of blocking and unblocking a website to ensure a well-balanced approach to online access to resources. It also includes the district-required technology safety training that outlines the process where district employees are provided training and education on the Internet Safety Plan and policies. So education and awareness is key. As part of our awareness campaign, cyber safety is front and center for the district. We want to help our community and district staff deal with these issues by providing appropriate resources that are easily accessible on our website anytime and from anywhere. It is part of our vision, which is committed to a new digital learning environment that embraces 21st century learning world that must be safe. So as we integrate more 21st century learning tools in our classrooms, we provide our teachers, students, and parents with the online resources to develop students' sense of responsibility and keep our students safe. We provide extensive resources for online digital citizenship, internet safety, social networking safety, cyberbullying, staff resources in English and Spanish that includes age-appropriate content. The internet is an ever-evolving world which comes with new opportunities as well as new challenges. Although nothing is 100% proof, the online safety of our students is a high priority. This plan is a living, breathing document that continues to evolve as we adapt to these new opportunities and challenges. That concludes my presentation for the online safety plan. I will open it now for any questions or comments.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Michael. Okay, comments or questions? Mr. Schneider, Ms. Barksdale. Please, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I know this is a big job. I mean, with so many entry points to the district. Have we had any significant breaches in the past year or so?
We did not have any significant breaches. We have some minor breaches where some students attempt to do some hacking on some systems, yes. And we did catch those
Yeah, I mean more
events.
significant, yeah.
Yes, yes.
So no significant breaches?
No significant
That's
breaches.
quite an accomplishment for a district of this size with the complexity that even though we're not on the absolute leading edge of technology, even for a district of this size and complexity, good job. Thank you.
Mr. Snyder?
John, I had a question. First of all, I appreciate the efforts of the district to protect both our resources and our students. But I have heard stories where folks want to implement things, instructional things, and occasionally run up against issues of being blocked by something or a basic conflict between what do we do to instruct and what do we do to protect. So I'm trying to find out if there's a process in place for a teacher or a school or whoever it might be to come work with you guys to try and implement some kind of solution where the instructional end gets done and yet we're still doing what we can to protect things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do work with some teachers. We actually hire them during the summer to work closely with us and guide us on some processes. We always welcome the opportunity, of course, to have teachers always give us the feedback and work very closely with us. It is really, it's an art that you balance these two, the use of these resources effectively and safely, and still, sometimes block resources that may be very useful in the classroom and for the teachers. But I think that's a good recommendation, Mr. Schneider.
Your microphone. And secondly, I wanted to find out about kids that bring their own devices or even adults, teachers, whatever. Obviously, they get blocked by the hardware and software we got in place for doing things to reach outside. But what do we do to formally educate those folks that bring it in on a more routine basis about exactly what the policies are, get them up to speed on compliance, that kind of thing?
Right. So it is part of this internet safety plan to educate all of our students and our teachers and the community on the safe use of those devices online. So we have developed content that we will be sharing with the teachers so they can share with the students that's age appropriate to educate them on online safety, how to use those devices in a safe fashion, and also make sure that we do have safeguards in our network where kids can turn on these devices and still are not able to do some of the inappropriate things that we block. So I think it's a combination. Education is a key component. We have developed the content that the teachers can use in the classroom to educate these students on a regular basis.
Other comments or questions? Okay, sorry. Hey, John, got a couple quick ones. Is there a reporting hotline or something for people that they believe, for some reason, have slipped through the cracks? In particular, your fourth slide, which is the cyberbullying, where they believe there's instances of kids who are being abused? Because some of that's actually outside our system, right? I mean, there's cyberbullying that goes on, Facebook
Right.
and other places. Do we have a reporting hotline in some way that they can let the administration know that they think kids are being bullied?
So we have on our webpage, I don't see it here, but it's because we cut it off when I took the screenshot. But we do have the ability for people to report inappropriate access, or if they have any issues or problems, that they can report anonymously. They don't have to disclose their name. And with enough information, we can track that. They can also report it to the help desk. With these online notifications that I read those personally, and the directors deal with those issues when there is an urgent situation like a cyber issue or a safety issue.
Okay, and so second is, do we have guidelines regarding relationships of staff to students on social networks and other things about who can and can't be friends and contact people?
Yes, we do have, as part of our policies, we have guidelines that define that kind of relationship.
And it's both ways. So if a student tries to friend their teachers, the teachers say, I can't do it. Teachers don't try to create relationships necessarily through all the social media outside.
That's correct,
Okay.
Mr. Williams, yes.
So the third thing ties in that, you may have talked about the training in the site, but do we require training, even if it's like a 5-minute video that goes over and the people have to basically take it, sign it, and basically say, I got it, and they know they're at risk of losing their job if they violate it? How does that work?
Yeah, so we developed actually a 3-minute video for elementary school, middle school, high school, and also one for staff, for teachers. And that would be distributed to the principals and the teachers. So we're trying to figure out a mechanism how to make sure that every person who views this signs an acknowledgement that they have reviewed that. We will be working with the associates on the mechanism of how to ensure that everybody actually views these videos and signs acknowledging that they have viewed them. Another option we're looking at is having an online mechanism where people, as part of the staff portal, go online, view those, and then the system would be able to identify that the person has gone through the video by answering certain questions. And if they answer them correctly, that we get the acknowledgement that the person has viewed the video and actually learned from it.
It's like a defensive driving type of thing, something
Right.
sort. Okay, it seems like we need something like that to make sure everybody on both sides, staff and students, understand what the rules are. So even if a staff knows they're not supposed to, the students know what the staff's not supposed to do, or the students know what they're not supposed to do.
Mr.
Okay.
Williams, if I might add, the employees, when we hire them through HR, are all signing off, understanding that they have received training and understand the appropriate use of the equipment.
Okay.
And those people who are returning each year are reminded as well. The employee handbook is very, very clear on those procedures and the process. And you have probably experienced with me once or twice in your career where we've gone in and had to, for the record, remove people and move on because
Right.
of inappropriate use. So using those pieces as acknowledgement of understanding the process has been beneficial.
And just to make clear, that's inappropriate use on or off campus. If it's a district asset, they can't go home and use their own network and use it in an inappropriate way either.
The standard is the standard regardless of the venue. Yes.
Okay. Other questions or comments on this topic? Okay, thank you, gentlemen, appreciate it.
Sure. Thank
It is a big job, John, that you have to try to, we didn't really get to how cool the cloud is, but protecting the cloud and protecting all the kids that use the cloud and using the technology
Thank you.
is great work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now let us turn to the next item, which is the results of an enterprise risk assessment. And we're going to be, that's huge, joined by Lori Lee, who's our interim director for the internal audit department, and 2 members of Gibson and 1 of TASB. And just as a reminder for those of you that we are really a pilot district with TASB on a new offering that they had, which I'm sure Nancy will give us more detail on, related to an internal audit enterprise risk assessment service that they are doing, and we appreciate the opportunity to be that district. But I'll turn it over to Lori and let her introduce our guests this evening.
Good evening, Board President Williams, Dr. Karstafen, Board of Trustees.
You can just pull it directly to you.
And push that little red
Grab it-
button.
Grab it by the
It looks
neck
like
and
it's
pull it
on.
toward you.
Okay.
I just wasn't speaking very loud.
Blast it, go.
Okay, so my name is Lori Lee. I'm the Interim Director of Internal Audit. I'm here to present Nancy Cotton with TASB,
TASB.
and the Gibson Consulting Group, Greg Gibson and Lon Hewer, and they're going to make the presentation for the enterprise risk assessment that they completed for us and all their findings.
That's great. Well, thank you again for being here. So why don't you just, if you would, just kind of, just make sure you give us the context about how all this came about and,
Yeah, sure.
I can do that.
there you go, perfect. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nancy Cotton. I'm Associate Executive Director of Planning and Human Resources for the Texas Association of School Boards, TASB. And as you were saying earlier, Mr. Williams, TASB this past spring decided to pilot a new service, and we selected Gibson Consulting to be our partner. And the new service was an internal audit service. And we are so thankful that Austin ISD was one of the first pilot districts to do that. And I wanted to come, especially tonight, to thank Austin ISD for being a pilot. Our board this past weekend actually looked at the pilot results. You were one of several school districts that we worked with. We were very fortunate to have a range of different school districts from a large urban to suburban to small. And our board voted unanimously this weekend to go ahead and offer this service to all school districts. So we'll be continuing to work with Gibson in the foreseeable future. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over, because I know time is short, to Lon Ewer, and he's going to go ahead and give you the presentation and results of the pilot.
Lon, you might just make sure, because I think when Nancy even talks about internal audit, that you described kind of this approach and this component that we took, which is not necessarily the full range of services that's offered under the internal audit. So we actually, you're piloting with us the enterprise risk assessment, which is a much broader, comprehensive look at our district and our, the risk and control environment that we've got. So sorry, just make sure that understands that the offerings of TASB are beyond what you just are doing just for us. Okay, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Lon Hewer. I'm the Director of Internal Audit Services at Gibson, and we're working with TASB in this project, and as part of this engagement, I was the auditor that led the risk assessment. The purpose of the risk assessment, briefly speaking, is to provide a framework for guiding the work of internal audit and the long-range audit plan. And so our work included both a comprehensive risk assessment of Austin ISD, as well as the development of recommendations for a long-range audit plan for the district. I'm not going to go through my entire presentation because it might take the rest of the evening, so I am going to move through it fairly quickly. If you have any questions, or if there's anything in the materials that you were given earlier, please stop me and ask a question. I want to jump to slide 9 in your presentation, what we found. And these are the items that kind of summarize our work. We found, first of all, that the historical approach that internal audit has taken does not adequately address the risks of the district. And by looking at what we had done historically, there were areas that we felt like were critical to the success of Austin ISD that were not part of the ongoing plans of internal audit, as well as risks that really weren't considered as part of their plan. And those included the reliability of financial information and operational information systems, the economy and efficiency of operations. So how well are we doing things? How efficient are we, and can we get more efficient? That's one of the areas that really wasn't addressed. And another was just the performance measurement of each program or area and the results of their operations and whether they're meeting their goals as set by management and set by the board. We also found that key business processes for managing revenue and expenditures appear to be sufficiently controlled. Those included controls in purchasing and accounts payable, controls over the collection of revenues, payroll to a certain extent, and the controls over athletics and other areas where we collect money, activity funds, and that sort of thing. We also felt that given how our work played out and the plans that we put together, that the internal audit skill sets are probably not as well aligned with the needs of an accounting or auditing program here, and include the need for specialization in certain areas like information technology, construction, special education, and those sorts of things. So if those are areas that are considered critical to the mission of the district, which we feel like they are, and those are areas that internal audit should be looking at, then those kind of skills are necessary in order to carry out reviews in those areas. We felt like to answer your one of the topics you brought up just a minute ago, Mr. Williams, was that opportunities exist to improve the program that we have, or the facilities we have for confidential reporting. And some of the things that we suggested that the district consider is actually outsourcing that function. Number one, that would introduce a degree of independence and objectivity to it. And there were other ways in which we could improve that to include cyberbullying and financial and other potential errors and problems to get a better bang for our buck than what we're currently doing. And the last point that we found was that the district and internal audit is devoting a significant amount of resources to relatively low-risk areas. And this is causing the district internal audit to not focus on what we consider to be higher-risk areas. And some of those areas that haven't been included in prior audit plans include academic management, construction, facilities, overall governance, human resources, information technology, security and monitoring, special ed, student information reporting, and transportation. So these were areas that really hadn't been a component of prior year's audit plans. And these, to our feeling, was that these were critical areas of success for the district. The way we went about our work is we identified all the potential audit areas and then developed a risk scoring plan or risk scoring program for each of those areas. So each area we evaluated according to a number of risk factors, and that's all in your materials, and I won't go through that. But essentially what we did was develop a composite risk score for each audit area, and the higher the risk score, the higher the risk of that area to the district, and therefore the higher the priority of looking and reviewing that area. For what we developed was a long-range plan, essentially to begin looking at those higher risk areas over a 4-year cycle. But we also recognize that those risk rankings include a certain amount of subjectivity, and also are subject to and available for the board to consider the relative rankings based on any other factors that they think are important. So the risk ranking itself doesn't say that we've got to march through these areas one by one from the very highest risk area to the lowest, but essentially it gives a map and a game plan for the internal audit program and which areas they should focus on first, and which areas are probably of less priority. During the course of any year, any information that comes up can also affect what we're doing. So we develop a plan generally for a year, but information that comes in and problems or issues that arise certainly can change the order or the projects that we've got on any one schedule. In your packet, we identified the higher risk areas, and I've got these listed on this slide. You've also got in your materials under your tab 4 and tab 5, you've got detailed scoring for each of these areas and a risk ranking for these. But the areas that we felt like were of highest risk begin with payroll, include facilities and operations, academic management, transportation, construction, et cetera. And this doesn't include them all, but really includes the top 14 or 15. We also identified in the schedule under tab 4 of your binder a plan for how internal audit would go about addressing these areas. And in year 1, those highest risk areas would include payroll, facilities and operations, academic management, transportation, and construction funds. Year 2 then would be those areas that are a little lower on the risk ranking: special education, child nutrition, human resources, et cetera. So we have a plan essentially to get to all of those areas over a 4-year cycle. What are the next steps that we think are important? The first step is deciding on the plan for the audit management, internal audit management. During the course of our work, we worked a lot with Lori, and I appreciate the work that we did with Lori. Lori was instrumental in working together with our team. But your regular, your auditor, your internal auditor retired during the course of our project, and right now I think you have an interim. Lori is serving as an interim, so the decision as to what we need to do in order to manage the internal audit function. And I think that it needs to be considered the areas that we have identified that need to be looked at and the kind of management you need to provide oversight for the audit of those areas. So we've included some areas that haven't been included in prior years, and we're also recommending that the department focus less on activity funds and more on higher risk audit areas, things like construction and special ed, et cetera. And in that regard, you're going to need an auditor and an audit manager that's got skills in auditing those areas. The next step is to estimate the time that's necessary for each of these audits. We provided a ballpark figure for how much time we thought each of those areas would require, but it's incumbent upon the department and to work out exactly how much time it's going to take to audit each of these areas so that we can develop an annual plan to address those. The third thing is to figure out how to fill the resource needs. As I mentioned, there's some areas in there that right now the department doesn't have the skills to address. So we need to decide whether those areas we're going to fill those technical resource needs through additional training, or whether the district needs to get resources from the outside in order to supplement the resources that we have internally. The fourth thing is to develop improved procedures for lower risk areas. We recommend that we transition the area of the work that's being done currently in activity funds from an audit function to more of a compliance and monitoring function. Support, training, and monitoring as opposed to an audit of these areas. It doesn't diminish the importance of the area, it just changes the way that we address that, and that's part of what we recommend that be done this year, is transition that area from what we're doing now to more of a monitoring function. And the last thing is to implement a time or project time reporting system. Currently, the department doesn't track all of the time they spent on all the projects, and we think that's a very important key in being able to plan and plan for the future in terms of how much time we're spending on particular projects and how much time we have available for audits and can plan for future audits. So those are the next steps as we see it. I'm ready to take any questions that you might have.
Okay, well, thanks to you and Greg and the team for doing this. I'll turn it over for questions and comments in just a second, but I wanted to say thanks to TASB for letting us partner, and I think it came as an opportune time for our district, because you providing this service at really the same time we were going through potentially a rethinking, and I'm going to say credit to our superintendent and our CFO for thinking, okay, are we getting the biggest bang for our internal audit buck? Are we really doing all the things that we need to do? And this enterprise risk assessment came along at that same time, and so it worked out very well for us as we try to evolve from really what may be a traditional internal audit shop. And I think people listening may understand, when you talk about activity funds, we're talking about all the campus level, PTA, Booster Club, the different programs at the campus. There's lots of money that churns through our campuses and activity levels. And internal audit historically has spent a lot of time focused on that, and that's the ones that get the attention in the press. Some bookkeeper somewhere steals $5,000 from an activity fund on a campus, and it gets a lot of news attention. But as we know, we've got tens of millions of dollars running through payroll, through our construction, through our facilities, and to the credit of the organization, it's a pretty good control environment, so we've really not had issues there, but we've really not had internal audit spending much time looking at those controls to make sure that they're in place and working well. And I think this effort is actually giving us the opportunity to have kind of an identification of which the higher risk areas are going to be, sort of a roadmap to get there, along with what's the needs, what are the staffing and the training and the things that we need to do to get there, and maybe try to rethink the way we approach internal audit and utilize that resources that actually has potentially a more material impact to the organization, knowing that there may be some other way we need to address the items that are higher activity, but certainly lower risk. In a billion-dollar business like we are, the $5,000 theft at a campus level gets a lot of PR, but on a relative basis, it's immaterial to the millions that are running through the other accounts. So thanks to TASB for, I think, thinking about this as a service for districts like ours and giving us the opportunity to partner. And I think appreciate to the superintendent and the CFO and to Lori and her team for working with Gibson to try to help us rethink and try to create a roadmap for going forward. So let's open for comments or questions. Ms. Moya.
Thank you. I want to provide my comments in a couple of different ways, one with my TASB hat on and one with my AISD board member hat on. First off, as a member of the TASB Board of Directors, I want to mention to our board here and those watching, and thank Gibson, of course, but the whole notion of bringing the whole internal audit pilot to school districts across the state of Texas was because when Nancy's group is doing their work, they identified an area that we felt, quite possibly wasn't being addressed in all districts across the state. As you all know, there's so many districts that are very, very small and don't have the funds to have an internal audit staff or anything like that. And so knowing that there are high risks in all districts of all sizes, it was the reason that this came up in the first place. And as Mark said, the pilot came up at a very opportune time for Austin ISD because we were transitioning from our internal auditor who was retiring. And so it was just a perfect opportunity for us to look at our function and see how well it was working and where we needed to improve things. Honestly, as a changing caps now, it was very eye-opening for me because learning about some of the high-risk areas in our district that had not gotten a look at ever was quite astounding for me. And so, I was glad to see the data and see, and start shining a light on what our really high-risk areas are. And as we move on through this, I would want to encourage the superintendent and our CFO and staff to look at taking our audit function of our activity funds out of internal audit altogether and put it in the budget office with the staffing that's needed in order to do that function. If it is, an oversight of monitoring something else, whatever it is. And as I understand it, and Nicole, correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, the bookkeepers that are on the campuses are not employees of the campus. They're part of the finance office. Is that right? No. Okay, because I've heard it two different ways.
Sorry, Nicole, you probably need to come up here on this one.
So if they're
Sorry.
not, so my thinking on this was based on or where I was going with this was based on the notion that they were actually not employees of the campus, but they were part of the finance office. And I often wondered why the principals were taking a hit if the bookkeeper and, all of those individuals that had control or their hands-on activity funds, it just seemed odd that the principal's taking a hit when the bookkeeper wasn't part of their staff. But if that's not the case, then erase, and go, and we can just think about it in terms of improving that whole structure, because I think. I don't think internal audit needs to be dealing with that. I think internal audit needs to be dealing with the high risk. Hi, Lynn. Do you have a question?
I would say that
chip in?
that those, how they carry out their function is something that is dictated to them. The procedures and all that is dictated to them by the finance office.
Right.
So that's, to the extent that they're doing their work is done at the direction of and in accordance with rules and guidelines that are given to them by,
Right.
not by the principal and not by the
No,
school.
I know that. I'm just trying to put the responsibility where it belongs. And I thought, based on some things I've heard at the campus level, that they actually were not employees of the campus and that the principal wasn't really responsible for them. So that was where I was going, but I do understand that they take their direction from the finance office.
Yeah, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the agreements that was made prior to my starting under the previous CFO administration was that, and I think some of this was born out of the efficiency study, that the training that was historically provided by the internal audit office in terms of guidance, that we would take over some of that training to reduce some of the conflict of interest. But the employees themselves are selected and managed by the principal.
Okay.
We have been speaking to HR about strengthening the requirements and revising the position descriptions, because quite frankly, at the level of expectations that we have set for the management of those accounts, the positions and the people in them in many cases are not necessarily qualified to carry out those functions. So that's something that we've talked to both HR and some of our principals about, looking at the position description and possibly recommending some possible upgrades as we look at sort of the new requirements.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that, because on my experience as a parent working with activity funds, the bookkeeper on campus, could always have been a much stronger, person to be working with and keeping up with those accounts. But also, I would like to see us find a way to improve our skills on our team, and whether that means, shifting people around, and maybe some people need to go over to to the finance office to do activity funds, whatever it takes. But I think as a district this size, we need to have the high skills dealing with the high risk, because these high risk areas like construction and facilities and payroll, special ed, all these others. I mean, we've got about 15 or 20 listed here, and even though we've got it divided up over 3 years of an audit plan or a 4-year audit plan, that's what we need to be spending our internal audit time on, because where the high risk is, that's where we need to be spending our time. And so I don't know why I'm rambling, so I will stop now and let somebody else talk.
Other questions or comments? Ms. Torres.
Well, I too want to express my thanks to TASB. This was actually quite fortuitous that at a time when we were in need of both this type of service, and as you say, we were about to lose our auditor. This was sort of a blessing that fell from the sky. So thank you very much for the fact that you guys were ahead of the game and that we were able to take advantage of that. I have one question on the relative risk ratings, and I think it really has to do more with just making sure I understand the category, and that's the category of child nutrition. Can you tell me what's included in that?
What the area includes?
Yeah, I mean, I think I know what payroll is.
Child nutrition is just your food service operation,
So
all
it's-
your cafeterias and,
So
yes.
it's another word for food services?
Yes.
Okay. And so that one really, we're talking really about the scale of the dollars involved and the fact that
That and the degree to which there's compliance rules, they're governed by TEA, they're governed by the feds as far as meals and financial, what they can and cannot submit for reimbursement.
So it really has
there's
less
some-
to do about nutrition than it does to do about the operations.
Well, and they, it's another operation that has cash collection. So, I mean, there's a lot of different factors in food service and child nutrition that it's just an area that has a lot of different tentacles. Some of them are compliance issues, some of them are health and safety. So you've got health and safety issues related to food safety, and
So it has less to do with nutrition.
yes, I guess it's right.
It's more operations.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Torres, just, and for if y'all want to see some of the details on their sub-process, after all these pages, it kind of got lost, but like on page 19, on number 10, if you go all the way across, he kind of lays out those areas that y'all would be looking at. Do you see what I'm talking about?
The tab, the final tab in your
Yeah.
in your
We-
in your actual
they don't have
three-ring
an
binder.
actual tab. So when you were saying tab.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, yeah. So we posted differently. That's okay.
Well,
Don't
we
worry.
provided that. I thought we provided it to you.
No,
That's
don't
okay.
worry about it. It's just the way it's loaded up on the system. It's no problem. But y'all did that work, and it's on page 19.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean, Mr.?
Yeah, and I think here the
Yeah,
process is
yeah,
listed as
but-
food services.
But that's what I'm saying is that's called food services,
I know.
and he called it child nutrition.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Shame on him.
I bounce back and forth on
Because I
that.
work with child nutrition.
Some districts call it child nutrition, and others
I
call
see.
it food service.
Okay. And I guess I think the other thing that I want to underscore about how important this particular activity is, and I want to thank Gibson and you, Mr. Hewer, for the work that you did and on this, because I think it highlights not just where we might have some financial challenges, but it also highlights where we can be more efficient with the use of our funds in terms of making sure that we allocate the appropriate amount of oversight resources in areas where perhaps we can reallocate those resources where they might do us a little bit better on the bottom line, so to speak. So I think overall, this whole activity, in addition to giving me as a board member comfort that we are indeed as we go forward, focusing on what we should focus on, focusing less on those things that perhaps we were overemphasizing, and that this gives us some opportunities to look for areas where we might be able to save some money because of the way our operations are being conducted. And so I thank you for the work that Gibson did, and I enjoyed working with you guys on this and look forward to implementation of the recommendations.
Okay, other comments, questions? Ms. Barksdale.
Thank you for the great work. I think my question might be more for the administration. Will we see the follow-up to this work in just regular audit reporting and that regular existing reporting rhythm with just references back to this kind of 1, 2, 3-year plan? Is that how that'll be handled so we can keep up with it?
So, yeah, that's what I actually was going to say. I was going to request that the administration actually prepare a response to this
Okay.
report and tell us how they think they would like to try to approach it, looking at the time frame, because we're in the middle of a school year with an existing staffing model that was not easy to change, with an audit plan for the fall but not for the spring. So one of the requests to the administration, I probably should have said earlier, is that I think given the report's now been presented to us, they're working, they've seen drafts of this, but to prepare a response about how they would look to propose addressing this, given the resource and staffing challenges that we have today relative to the risk.
That covers me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Bradley.
No, actually, my question was going to be to the superintendent, which was going to be, what are your next steps? And I think that pretty much covered what you...
I would expect they probably would come back to us in a dialogue session, give us how they would plan on doing it, so we can have an interactive conversation, so it's not just pure one way. The plan is in place for Lori and her team for the fall. I mean, they really have a full plan, so it doesn't have to happen tomorrow, but we really want to be in position that, to the extent that I think they can come back with some suggestions about what they would look to start trying to do in the spring, that would be hopefully part of the plan, and then there'd be some more even beyond that in basically next year and the following year. And it gets built into the planning cycle for next year. But I think that what hope would be is they'd come back so the board would have a chance to actually react to what they're thinking about, because this is a function that really has a board-level scrutiny to it as the internal audit function. I don't know if does that, do you want her to say that?
It works for me.
Well, I thought pretty much what you said earlier pretty much covered what my question was, but if you want to go back to it again, okay.
Okay, let's start the meeting. Let's call to order. Sorry. Mr. Snyder. Okay, other comments or questions? Okay, that's it. Well, Nancy, thank you for TASB giving us the opportunity to do this. Hopefully, and to Lori. And Greg, Lon, she's taking all the glory. So thank you all for your work with our team, and look forward to kind of helping develop as they think about the response. And Lori, thanks to your team. I know there's a lot of work to be done, and keep up the good work for this semester, and then we'll kind of figure out as a group how we evolve based on this report.
Thank you.
So thanks a lot.
Paul?
Okay, you all have a great evening.
Thanks. Great, I'm ready.
Okay, so we'll move to the next item, which is a preliminary scenario discussion. Dr. Christopher, we've got 80 minutes allocated for this, folks, and it's 7:07.
Mr.
7 or 8,
President
yeah.
and trustees, this evening you're scheduled to discuss two specific potential AFRs, the School for Young Men and Garcia and Pierce Middle School Program Design for District 1. This is a continuation of many board discussions regarding single-sex education, but you talked and to some extent, most recently at your September 10th work session on the development of all the AFRs, and asked us to bring these two just kind of independently so we could talk about them together. Both potential AFRs are scheduled for board action this coming December 2012. However, the implementation dates may not be the same. The first, the proposed School for Young Men, it probably will open in the 13-14 school year, whereas the District 1 Garcia Middle School design may open as late as the 14-15 school year. But again, as we work through things, there might be some adjustments to these, but as we closed out last time, that's where we were. Tonight, the administration is seeking board feedback and input. Paul Cruz, the Chief Schools Officer, Lawrence Fryer, the Chief Operations Officer, are available to walk us through the big designs one more time, and then we'll open it up for questions. So, Paul, could you lead first on School for Young Men?
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Karstarfin. As you all know, AISD already has a secondary school for young women, and over the past year, the district has explored other ideas for single-sex education, from single-sex classes within a co-ed school to entire schools for only boys or girls. Research shows that schools that use best practices for gender-specific teaching may be more successful in teaching to boys and girls' strengths. Proponents of single-gender education point to a range of other potential benefits, both for students and their teachers, that include increased academic achievement, increased equity in curriculum and access to student opportunities, and better peer interaction. Opposing research claims single-sex education is ineffective and contributes to an increase of gender stereotypes. The research falls on both sides of the debate. Notwithstanding the research, district data continues to indicate that there are district-wide achievement gaps between girls and boys, between racial ethnic groups, and between boys and girls within racial and ethnic groups. This disparity is also evident in school dropout and graduation rates, so additional models may help us address some of these issues. The first potential design represents, which is a school for young men, represents a snapshot of our current stage in a planning process that really began years ago and originated as a result of a longstanding community interest in establishing a middle school for young men comparable to the Ann Richards School for Young Women Leaders. Many have expressed support for the exploration of a college and career preparatory academy that develops a community of leadership and character-centered young men. The Moody Foundation has approved $4.6 million in funding over 7 years for such a project. I'm going to talk a little bit about the planning team. For this project, in December 2011, the district created a 24-member planning team made up of half AISD staff and half parents and community members. 2 of those parent community members are in the audience right now. We have Paul Mitchell and we have Stacy Stakoulis. I saw them earlier, and Mary Thomas and Nancy Phillips. The planning team developed the mission, belief statements, and objectives that were used to inform the academic design of the school. To support the school's mission and objectives, the district formed 7 action teams to carry out planning in 7 key areas. After many community engagement meetings and the completion of a feasibility study, which included a survey that indicates parent and guardian support for this effort, the potential design would be as follows. The School for Young Men would serve young men in grades 6 through 12. Beginning in school year 2013-14, the school would open with a projected enrollment of 230 students in 6th and 7th grades. Enrollment is expected to increase by 115 students each year through the 2017-2018 school year.
And just to remind the board, behind your tab, the section that we're talking about that Mr. Fryer's about to go over begins on page 2, which outlines gives you the big pieces of the School for Young Men and some of the delivery models, but he's going to give you the high-level buckets that we do it in. Mr. Fryer.
Yes, thank you. President Williams, Board of Trustees, Dr. Karstarfin. In the development of this AAFR, there are currently 5 scenarios being reviewed and discussed. The scenarios generally fall into one of 2 categories or buckets. Scenarios 1, 2, 3, and 4 fall into one bucket, and in this bucket are the scenarios that would involve the use of an existing AISD school that is currently under-enrolled and has additional space. The School for Young Men would co-locate in the building, and in the future years, either move to another facility or the existing school at that facility would be phased out. We have attached the capacity numbers at the potential school sites, and the sites with the most space are Lamar, Garcia, Pierce, and Covington Middle Schools. The other bucket, which includes scenario 5, would involve taking an existing AISD facility that is not currently serving as a traditional school building and renovating and remodeling it to meet this new vision. The most likely site for this consideration is the building that currently houses the Alternative Learning Center, or ALC, and it is the old Anderson High School building. We are working on cost estimates for each of the scenarios to help give you an idea of the funding picture, but these are very broad estimates that would need to be refined once we narrow the field down on the possible scenarios. And they are tied to the pros and cons of each of the 2 big buckets. In the first bucket, to address existing inefficiencies in facility use, The first 4 scenarios are either based on a model like LBJ LASA, if it's a permanent co-location, or you're reassigning students to other schools over time to phase in the School for Young Men. As this relates to financial implications, we are talking about a funding gap that would roughly be $500,000 to relocate students, provide transportation, and use a portion of private funding to bring those costs down. But in scenario 5, which would have far less impact on current school assignments, the biggest challenge would be transforming the facility with renovations to bring it to standards for a comprehensive secondary school. We currently estimate that this would cost at least $12 million. For such expenses as constructing science labs, building a cafeteria, gymnasium, and providing an overall facelift to the entire building. While these costs can be brought down with external funder support, it will require that the district plan to cover at least half of the costs of these capital improvements. Further, it would take time to sort out the relocation of our disciplinary alternative education program, DAEP programming, that's currently located at that site.
And further, when we looked at the 4 schools, if you take a glance at Exhibit D with your middle school capacity, we know that, on the other hand, we are looking at other designs for District 1, which are Pearson Garcia. We know that Lamar is already in the throes of being part of the arts design that's part of McCallum. So in the end, we were kind of left with really only one middle school site that wasn't in the throes of having something else being considered for its space. And that left us with Covington. But Covington came with the pros and cons portion of being in a design where you have one school on one side and one school on the other that aren't offering the same programming design. And our experience in AISD has been mixed on how that has played out over the years. So when the planning team for the School of Young Men met most recently about the designs, it was clear from just about all of the engagement that the concept of using ALC and renovating that site was preferred over doing anything around co-location or the possible, reassignment of students. But again, the cost was a little bit of a pill to swallow when we really started getting into what it would take to make that school ready for a secondary level. And then even though we've talked about the School for Young Men, when I've gone to the community meetings, it became clear that there was a little bit of confusion between the design for the School for Young Men, which is a school that's very much so designed around choice and being in alignment with the design of Ann Richards, and what we were doing in District 1. So before we transition to a discussion, I just wanted to make it clear that where the School for Young Men design is far more like the application process and the district-wide use of the program from all over AISD, Pearson Garcia are not, and they were specifically designed to try to serve better the school and community populations of those attendance areas. And specifically, these designs are, the conversation is far more about us addressing the achievement gap, high dropout rates, and any of the transition concerns of support in the academic design from the middle school to be able to transition successfully to the early college, high school, early college start designs of LBJ and Reagan. And further, those two schools, unlike a school that would be starting from scratch, like the School for Young Men, they already have some accountability rating history associated with them, where for 3 out of the past 4 years, they were academically unacceptable. But over the past school year and into this school year, so almost an entire calendar year, we've been exploring the idea of single-sex middle schools in District 1 with extensive feedback and guidance from Trustee Cheryl Bradley. And the proposal, or one of the potential scenario designs, this is still included in the Pierce and Garcia District 1. Now, Dr. Cruz, you're going to take it from here to talk about a little bit of this design to be sure that we don't confuse the two for tonight. We carried this over from last year.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly. I'm just going to,
And in the larger context of District 1.
right.
Okay. I'm trying to help you.
I thought we were going to do just the school for
Could
young
we-
men, so it just sort of threw me off a little bit.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. So to allow additional time to consider the proposal, this particular AFR was carried over, and we have been actively seeking feedback from community leaders, parents and students, and school leadership. In the larger context of District 1, student success at LBJ and Reagan High Schools begins in middle school. Both of these high schools are designed as the district's early college high schools. Aligning academic programming with the culture of high expectations and single-sex education at Garcia and Pierce Middle Schools could contribute to the college-ready culture at LBJ and Reagan High Schools as early college high schools. A planning team made up of some 50 participants, including 15 district staff and 35 parents and community members, is continuing to re-examine research, further engage the community, refine the 3 original preliminary scenarios, which still include possibilities for a single-sex education, or rather for single-sex education, at Pierce and Garcia Middle Schools, and create new scenarios as appropriate. That is one of the options that was posed to the group this past week when the group met. The program design is based on input from community discussions and on board guidance. The district looks to implement program enhancements for Garcia and Pierce Middle Schools that focus on college and career preparedness in a culture that develops leadership and service skills.
And I'll now go through the scenarios. The first scenario is the one that's been vetted the longest, Scenario 1. And this is the scenario that has been considered since October 2011 and is a carryover from the 2012-13 AAFRs. For the past 11 months, the concept of single-sex middle schools as embodied in Scenario 1 has been vetted with the community and discussed at the board level. In this scenario, the college prep culture and curriculum supported by the college board is core to the design where 2 single-sex middle schools, grades 6 through 8, are in a combined attendance area for Garcia and Pierce Middle Schools. The attendance area for Garcia and Pierce Middle Schools would be combined. Students in the Pierce and Garcia attendance areas who choose not to attend one of the single-sex middle schools would be assigned to Dobie, Martin, Lamar, or Webb Middle Schools. To improve feeder patterns, alternate assignments will be based on the student's elementary attendance area. High schools assignments for students who choose to attend an alternative middle school assignment would not change. Now moving to Scenario 2. We expect that the planning team is looking at many different ways to consider a program design that would support single-sex education. For example, 1 single-sex middle school, grades 6 through 8, could be created in a combined attendance area for Garcia and Pierce Middle School. Or one of the schools could have co-ed classes structured more like Webb Middle School is today. And then finally, Scenario 3, which is where you could choose to continue and enhance existing co-ed programs at Pierce and Garcia Middle Schools. And in that case, the board would not need to take action on Scenario 3. As with the School for Young Men, we're working on cost estimates for each of the scenarios. Approximately $10 million in annual operating costs would be reallocated from funding that is currently used to operate the 2 schools. The major cause of the funding gap for these scenarios is the cost of transportation to alternate campuses. Depending on the retention rate for these programs, especially in Scenario 1, the transportation costs could range from $500,000 to $650,000 per year. Further, given the current enrollment in the schools, we anticipate further gap costs depending on enrollment numbers. We would need more students in these schools than we have today. The proposed designs, which are based on a minimum enrollment of 650 students, represent half the capacity of the schools, which at full capacity can accommodate more than 1,000 students each. Bond contingency is expected to cover the estimated $600,000 cost of single-sex facility adjustments at both of the 2 schools.
So, Mr. President and trustees of the board, we're prepared to talk about them. I mean, depending on how you want to have the discussion, it's kind of hard to completely separate them, especially given where we have some of the capacity issues. And we're happy to answer any other questions, but much like why like Pierce or Garcia weren't as appealing for the discussion and looking for a site for young men. I mean, we know there are other schools that are under-enrolled. Martin is an example of one, but given that we had just, we're just working through our last year's AAFR and trying to manage that and what does the impact look like, we're trying not to like continuously put on some of the schools that are experiencing some of the design changes from previous years. So we're tracking all those things and, and trying to manage them. We even looked at elementary sites, but then again, we got back into the cost. So we're at the very early stages still, although we've been working on these things for a long time. It's still trying to narrow down these scenarios to one or two of the better ones and just really doing deep drill downs. And we have planning teams still working now. They'll be working all the way through December until we get to something that we can finally recommend. But Mr. President, trustees of the board, just as a reminder, you're currently scheduled to take action on these on December 17th, and we're available to answer any questions that you have.
So so the December 17th, but prior to that time, the administration will, based on the feedback tonight and from the committee, will have a recommendation. So the action will be based on there being an administrative recommendation on which the board would be asked to take action, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And yet you don't have, the point is we don't have the recommendation yet. That's why this discussion's occurring. Okay. Let's open up for comments or questions. And if maybe we can, if there's questions just about the School for Young Men first, just if there's some programmatic or things that understand, maybe separate from the facility questions, are there any programmatic design, structural things about that school first that people want to ask? Ms. Barksdale.
I have a question. If you could, thank you very much for your presentation. It's very clear, laid it out really well. Just help refresh my memory on the Moody Foundation grant, what it was for, what the expected outcome was, and is that work done?
It's a great question. What they did is they made a commitment to the district for about $4.6 million, depending on the decision of the board on launching a program. So it kind of comes in phases, depend on our decision-making along the way. The first chunk of dollars in the first year, Paul, for this work, which included a feasibility study, which was the biggest part, making sure that we went back and did all the, I gave you all the results of the study, looking at what all the community said, taking all the data, and surveying parents across Austin one more time. The second piece was to be able to help us build capacity.
Right.
We hired some staffing. They even
Project director?
Yep, the project director
And planning teams?
Yep, and thank you, the planning teams. But the other piece that we still are kind of holding off on is the piece of hiring. We can even hire with the grant dollars the principal in advance to be able to do more work on the school before its opening date, which helps relieve the burden on our budgets because the school's not up and running. And the total amount in the first phase spend down of the 4.6 was how much?
It's about 400,000 because that would also include pay for a principal, a curriculum specialist, and a secretary.
And the trips.
Correct.
And we were able to do some site visits as well. Now, so that's the first chunk of the grant. The remaining amount, by and large, goes toward us being able to do any special staffing, programmatic pieces around professional development, any specialized, curriculum work that we need to do or anything of that sort, and any buy down of what would mostly be the M&O cost of opening a school. So as y'all know, we just opened Up House. It starts at easily like a $3 to $5 million range for us to get anything up off the ground. So that's about 10%. What's left ends up being about 10% of what we need to do. But that 4.6 is over 7 years.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not like you just get all the millions at one time to be able to put completely toward it. So it supports, like I said, the programmatic piece over time. We have talked to them about going back for future requests as we get our arms around the rest of it, whether it's capital cost or programmatic cost. And they have at least indicated initially, depending on the decision of the board, that if there were other things that we really needed to get the school off the ground, that they would be willing to consider future proposals.
Okay, other questions or comments on Ms. Schneider?
Dr. Starfin, just so I'm clear, and when people ask me, I'm clear, we're potentially talking about 3 single-gender schools. Is that correct?
You have the Ann Richards one, so that's one. But for the purposes of new programming, a boys' school would add to that, right? For the entire district, shaped like the Ann Richards, the school for young men. And then depending on what's decided for District 1, you could have 2 more or 1 more. Just depends on what y'all decide to do, or none.
So potentially 3 new single-gender schools in addition to Richards.
That is one possibility.
Okay. All right. I wanted to talk a little bit about equity, particularly on the facility side. I'm very concerned about Title IX issues is really what it comes down to.
Excuse me, and are you just talking about the school for young men or all of them?
The same thing could be applied to all of them if we're talking about Pierce versus Garcia as an example. I mean, you have one very new, very modern, up-to-date school. Pierce, not to, belittle their facility, but, I mean, it's an older facility that is not up to the Garcia standard more than anything else. 2 of the facilities that you mentioned in the 4 plus the old Anderson High School, I'm looking for relative equity versus Richards as an example. And I know that we've added some things to Richards, redone their band hall and put a new building in the back, that kind of thing, relative to what Porter was. But in terms of relative age of the facility, condition, that kind of thing, the 2 that seem to be available by process of elimination tend to either be Covington or the old Anderson. The old Anderson is significantly old. But, I mean, there would be a lot of work. I mean, your $12 million figure alone said quite a bit, plus it doesn't alleviate some of the fundamental problems that have been at that site unless you've got a way to remove a fault. It's going to be there for a while.
I mean, but just to be clear about that, we as a board have talked about this fault thing under the ground. It's the, I told you, it's like the moving mole. I don't know if you've ever seen those movies where, like, they have the mole, then the mole's over here, and the mole's over here. That fault line moves like a movie mole, right? I've seen multiple pictures, and it's never particularly consistent based on which part of the lore of AISD you want to believe. We have looked at that thing again, and the fault line is not under that building. Am I correct today?
Right, that fault line goes, as you look at the front of the building where the portables are with the JJAEP, it goes up to that corner and by the gymnasium, between the school, the gym, and the track. So it's not up through the school like we thought it was. And the thought was that the reason one of the wings was not in use was because it was on top of the fault line. But it turns out that's not true.
And we went over all this in excruciating detail when we talked about the Performing Arts Center. Remember, like everybody told me that wasn't, so we went back, we looked at it, and then we found out that that indeed was not true. And so we were able to seriously consider our own piece of property, but for different reasons, it wasn't ideal. But I feel very comfortable now that we've settled the mole in one place on our AISD face. That fault line is a nightmare.
We may have a fault that has been removed, but I think there are also soil issues over there. I mean, the clay soils are still there. Is that correct, Mr. Shaw, or not to pick on you,
Could
sir?
Mr. Shaw join us at the table then, and maybe Turner, if he's still here, just so like people don't have to get up and down. But soil issues? Never heard that one.
Well, there are issues like very similar to what we've got on the in the eastern part of the school district. There's some expansiveness to there, but they're not soils that can't be contended with. Our most recent venture in that area is at Overton Elementary School. Our school has withheld many more conditions than its next door neighbor, just because we know how to deal with those soils conditions. So there will have to be some attention paid to that. But as far as it being untenable as far as the building site is concerned, that's not the case.
Okay.
And can I go back to your first question while everybody's, but can you just go back on your equity Title IX, just one more time?
Sure.
What was the question in there so we can go back and work on it?
The question is that we currently have a school for young women. We do not have any kind of equivalent
Boys.
for boys' school, which in and of itself is a potential Title IX issue. We also have the equity issue with regard to facility, as far as I'm aware, that I've seen this in other cases where there are single-gender schools where, school for men is an example, nice new modern facility. School for women at the same time is in a 60-year-old building that is falling down or perceived to be falling down, or however you want to look at it. That there have been, at least in the cases that I've read about from other districts, cited as a potential Title IX complaint in and of itself. So, I'm sensitive to some kind of equity in the facilities that we're providing, as well as programs as well, too.
Right, and fair enough. And then the other thing is, at least when, we went back over the institutional documentation of getting to the Ann Richards, my understanding around Title IX was the issue of choice, like where kids aren't required to go to the school, and you don't offer families, another educational environment if they don't want to be part of that. But I will make sure that we check with both of our legal counsels and others about the boys' school, girls' school, a match to Ann Richards. That's never been raised as a legal issue at all. The other thing is, if you don't do the Moody School, but you do something in District 1, if that ends up being a design, it's not like we tell people you can't go to a different neighborhood school. You could always transfer in and enjoy the programmatic designs, but just at a different site. It doesn't have to necessarily be the Moody School if this one does not come to fruition. So, but we'll map it out and make sure that we double check it across our legal stuff. But it's my understanding from all of our sources that right now we still, because we offer choice, it allows for us to not have Title IX issues.
Okay. And while we're on that general thread, I'm aware of a court ruling that happened a couple of 6 to 8 weeks ago that basically said that the model that we're considering for the Pierce Garcia area, where it's a combined attendance zone, basically the court ruling said that the only way that you could send kids to the single-gender school would be to offer that as a choice versus requiring kids that live in that attendance zone to go to that school. So I'd like to get some clarity on that issue as well.
Right, and so, again, even though everybody, by and large, at the, at any level, elementary, middle, high school, has an attendance area that you're assigned to. You don't have to go, even if we're not talking about single-sex education, but if you really have a reason for transferring or making a request for transfer, it is considered, we have policy around it. That's not an issue for us. What the approach to thus far, our thinking on the District 1 piece, is that yes, you would combine the attendance areas, or however the attendance area part works. It would be your home school, and then you would decide whether or not you want to go to your home school or not. And then we would offer transportation. That's why, like I said, the cost is really in transportation and the retention rate. If people stay, that brings those costs down. If they decide that this is not the right fit for their community and we have a lot, we can't retain even the numbers we have today, then we have a problem. But we would, of course, allow them to go to other schools, which is why Mr. Fryer named those schools, because we, similar to your concerns, just wanted to be sure that we were giving families choices and options if they did not choose the school in their attendance area. And as a matter of fact, I mean, that's why you see scenario 2 on page, for Pearson Garcia, it's on page 4. And this is just one example. I went to the first planning team meeting just to ensure that things, answer any questions, because I know I've been thinking about it with the rest of the team a lot longer than some of the community people that were coming in. But, one of this design here is about one single-sex school, right? Still a combined attendance area. You could serve boys and girls, and the other school stays co-ed. Even before we started, as I was walking the room, people were saying, well, can we do a model like Webb, where it's, the programming of the school is inspired by single-sex programming, but it's based on classes, not necessarily the school having a hard line between boys and girls. That is another possibility. So, I'm not even sure that it's really, that all the scenarios are going to end up being Pierce and Garcia. We know in the first scenario it is, but not necessarily for the other ones that they're developing. And even as we said at the board table, y'all came up with a couple other designs, which they are committed to vetting all of them, but at the core of it, making sure that the programming and the staffing piece and, and the budget around it, those are things that we need them to vet for every scenario, even if they don't feel like that's their scenario of choice. We're asking them to work through all of them so that the administration can have a full picture of what, families in the community might consider.
Mark, I have some other questions related to facilities, but I'll be glad to step aside and let others ask for right now.
Okay, we'll open up other questions or comments. On this topic, we can. Ms. Schneider.
I thought you said you were passing.
So much for that rest.
Thanks for the offer. You were in a flow. Didn't want to slow you down.
Okay, thank you. I'm taking we can talk a little bit more about specific facilities at this point. I'm looking at scenario 2, and you're saying 325 for the boys' school and another 325 for the girls' school. In grades 6 through 8. Is that the correct information? I'm looking at page 4 again on the...
Yes, it is.
Okay. So if we went to having Pierce for boys and Garcia for girls, just as the example, more than anything else, we're talking about 325 kids and a school that has a capacity by your numbers of 1,200.
But what you just described is not this scenario. This scenario is you pick a school. I'm just going to, just so I can keep them in order, Garcia Pierce. You still have combined attendance areas, but we're saying one site stays co-ed. The other is made up of boys and girls under a single-sex academic programming design. When you're going to school, that's what you're getting. The combined enrollment is the 325 plus 325, and that's a starting place. That's what I was saying, we don't want these numbers to go lower than this. And then the other school stays co-ed, traditional, and we beef up the programming there. And so you're technically in the attendance area, you have a single-sex school if you want to go to it, and we would provide you transportation, allow you to go. We would have to pay for that transportation, but the other school technically would not change in its design. You're basically focusing on one school as the single-sex model for that attendance area.
So did I pick the wrong scenario then, or have we stepped away from the model of one's all girls, one's all boys?
That's scenario 1.
Scenario 1. But you're still talking about, I'm struggling to see how we get from 325 to 650, and especially given the feedback that we've had from the community that was overwhelmingly negative in terms of wanting, either students wanting to go to the school, which was part of the population that was surveyed. I haven't seen any updated data on that. Or, parents wanting to send their kids there, which was a little bit more positive, but still not overwhelmingly positive at all.
Right.
So, if we're talking about a relatively small number of kids going to a school that is all boys or all girls, I guess we're talking about scenario one, how are we justifying the use of half the facility at best?
Well, and that was, that, again, not knowing, I think it's fair enough, we don't know what the end decision's going to be for the School for Young Men. It is possible, after, which is what we've talked about in the planning team, or even last year, is that if it ends up being that your single-sex school design, because you don't end up doing Moody or something like that, ends up being in District 1, right? If it ends up being there, it is possible that after you serve the attendance area, that other families would want to transfer in for that academic programming. It's something we've seen with dual language, right? Becker's a perfect example. Ridgetop is another example. For the kids they have in their attendance area, they will come for that, but then we see other students transferring in. If you end up with, I know you said 3, but, again, it's never done till it's done. If in the end, the School for Young Men falls off the plate, and you have your only, option that we have on the table for consideration for a single-sex school for young men would be in District 1. And I can see why under that scenario where you could have families choosing from all over the district, based on space, which we would have a lot of, where you could come in and transfer into that school if that was your only boys' school option. And again, it's, just to be clear, we don't have all the answers because we've got a few more months to really get through this and see where we end up. But, we kind of have that sitting out there if the School for Young Men under the Moody design does not come to life.
Okay. I'll just say 2 things and let it go at that for right now. But, Dr. Korshoff, the last time we talked about this, I specifically asked for, tell me the delta cost for what this is going to be. I can't find that anywhere in the presentation tonight. You did cover some of the cost of the $500K, I believe, that was the transportation issue, plus the $12 million for the Anderson remodel that would have to require minimum of 6, I think was the figure used.
Minimum of 12. We think at minimum it's 12.
Okay, but a minimum that, my understanding of what was said, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, was that we were looking at the district paying a minimum of $6 million, in other words, half the
Right,
cost.
yeah. We think the district at the end of the day would be paying for half of that 12.
Okay. But, it's difficult for me, knowing what I think I know about what our current budget situation is and what it might be in the future, to enthusiastically buy into any of this right now, simply because the money in there is the way I see it, and I don't see it getting better. So, I would really ask that, we have something in the future that details a little bit more of the cost. The second point is...
May I just answer
Sure,
the thing on cost?
please.
Okay, so we agree, and it's a lot of scenarios with a lot of moving targets. Like when even on the District 1, we were doing like 100% retention rates, 75% retention rates, 50% retention rates, and then doing it for every last one of those scenarios, which is fair enough. We can put all these incredibly draft numbers out, but what planning teams, and I know even the planning team for School for Young Men, they really haven't had a chance to vet through the numbers of the facility stuff as we're seeing it emerge. While we're having these conversations at the board table, there are planning teams that are doing a lot of the drill down work. I do not have those numbers now. Now, my team understands, my facility people, my finance people, and my school people understand that the sooner we have these numbers, the better off we will be. But rushing through and putting out bad numbers, when I started seeing some of the draft work, questions I had needed to be just revised before I brought it to our school board. I just think it's far too early, but we are working on it. There are some things that I anticipate that this week, right, Lawrence Fryer? We're trying for the lead up to the October 8th board meeting, which is the work session, correct? Right? As soon as I get the numbers done, I'm putting them in, which I hope to be Thursday. But again, I want to send them all together because I think it's hard to look at one without looking at the other and adding stuff up. And so our goal is October 8th, and I want to be able to provide to the board all of that and the public with our best numbers that we have, understanding that they are very draft, and I need the planning team seriously working on them to help us shape a final recommendation. But it's just, there are just a lot of questions in it, and the numbers that I gave you are the best that I have today, and then there are many details underneath that we are clear that those numbers need to be fully vetted, and we need to be ready to put some of those numbers out by your October 8th meeting.
Okay. And the final point I'd make is that, we're 1st of October here, and we've got a limited number of meetings that are scheduled for both board discussion of this in November and October. Mid-December vote on up or down on this. And the two things that I'm not seeing that I don't feel comfortable about are, at the last meeting that we discussed this, it was pretty clear that the board wanted the business case made for this. And I really haven't seen responses that indicate that here's the business case for it, or here's why we think it's the best way to go. So that's an issue with me. And the other issue is what I consider to be just the limited public engagement on this. And
which list are you referring to? Everything?
No. Just the single-gender school, but I'll
The
leave
School
it.
for Young Men.
I will.
Is that the one?
Single-gender schools, whether it's School for Young Men, the Pierce Garcia model, that I know from our sheet that we got tonight that you have some hour and a half, 2-hour meetings are scheduled on the issue. There are the public communication opportunities at the 3 regular board meetings between now and the vote. But, I am very concerned about the public reaction and the public opportunity for input on these issues.
So, Mr. President, Trustee of the Board, Trustee Schneider, on page 9 of the agenda item, we are tracking every touch point of everything that we're doing, not just around these AFRs, but all the other ones. We are literally having almost hundreds of meetings on just one AFR. So all I have to say is that I have the time that the universe gives us. We get 24 hours in a day, we get 7 days a week, and 365 days a year. And at every point where we can utilize it to do the engagement work that seems to me to be mounting into some unrealistic expectation of this district to do outreach there's not a month or almost a week that goes by where we're not touching something about a dozen AAFRs. So it's either the board needs to give me direction, do 3, and only 3, and let's really focus on outreach and stuff on that. But so long as everybody is asking for a lot of things, I think they legitimately need to be considered. We have the capacity we have, and there's not a day where we feel like we can schedule that's not in conflict with something else that we're not using for outreach on these AAFRs. And that is the truth. Y'all can go back through your own calendars and everything else. We have simply booked ourselves almost every day for the entire fall and into the winter before we leave for winter break. I will do our best to get more outreach, to get more people there, but we are surveying. We are, doing these meetings. We are using advisory committees and planning teams who represent the community. And again, I welcome any rethinking, but just telling us that we're not doing enough just really isn't helping me at this point. And everything else that we said last time, I've charged my team to get done, put on the website. We're doing more and more, but I don't think it seems like it's going to be enough. So this is as good as it gets for us right now until we get to December.
Ms. Bradley.
Dr. Karstoffen, I think you're moving down the right path, and I think that the board has already said, or at least I remember, that we wanted you to explore these options. Secondly, I'm not sure what overwhelmingly you heard, but I think that you could hear opposition against as well as you could hear people for it. As far as children, I am not going to ask kids between the age of 10 and 14 years old whether they want to do this model. That's just not going to happen. Now, I will talk to parents all day and all night long, but I will not talk to a child about that. That's not a child's decision. That's the decision of adults. And I think that's the problem we have in our school right now, is because we have allowed children to make decisions that adults should be making, and we have allowed them to behave in a manner that's just not appropriate. And adults need to stand up, they need to take their role, and they need to step up front. And so you will not hear me ask a child any such thing. Secondly, I think the business plan that we should have, it should be about the academic of children. That should be the only business plan we have. Now, I'm not particularly sure how long schools have to fail before we say we need to change what we're doing. Now, we cannot sit up here and have a scenario that says we keep things the same way. Anytime that we have put a plan or a program in any school east of I-35, to me, it has always been a guinea pig plan, always. And the one thing that we always use, we're going to increase the rigor. Well, we start off doing that, but somewhere down the line, it ends up turning into a remedial program all the time. All I'm saying with this, and it is up to I have taken a step back. I want the planning committee to look at it, and if they come up with something different, they come up with something different. But the thing of it is that we have to do something differently as we look at educating children. We're continuously speaking of the achievement gap, and yet and still we do not change what we're doing to eradicate it. Now, we talk about something closing, but we never talk about how we eliminate it, and I believe that this is a model to do it. You're looking at leadership, male leadership, you're looking at I know you all said service. I didn't particularly like the way that sounded because it's almost saying we're having indentured servants, but we're talking about a customer service orientation as well as character building. So, I mean, it's to me, I'm looking at something that mirrors the Young Men's Leadership, the Young Male Leadership Academy, when you're speaking of that. But our business plan should be about educating kids to the best of our ability, and putting a model in there that's project-based, that should mirror a magnet program. Because I'm serious, when you look at some of our schools and you look at some of the academic programs and you start trying to compare them, there's your equity issue. So I sit here and as I listen to certain things, I think that we get far off base with, in my opinion, what should be important. And if we're going to talk about a business plan, then let's make sure we're looking at the academics of that business plan.
Other comments, questions? Ms. Moya.
I just have a general comment, not about any one of these particular plans, but this weekend at the TASB Board of Directors meeting, the president of TASB made a comment that I think should, resonate with all of us. And for me, it's I'm going to write it down. I'm going to keep it in front of me at all times, which is keep the main thing, because the main thing is educating our kids. And that's what we need to do, is keep the main thing. And so, I look at this and I see all of the different activities that the district is scheduling, has scheduled, has completed over the last year, And I don't know how anyone, anywhere could say that district staff is not reaching out into various types, various parts of the community, talking to people all over the place about everything we're doing. So, you know, one of the things that I've noticed is that on occasion when we have citizens communication and a handful of people come and voice an opinion one way or another, all of a sudden it becomes these 4 or 5 people are speaking for an entire community. They're not. They're speaking for themselves and for maybe their group, however large or small that group may be. But those people, we cannot say are the entire community, because in some of these cases, particularly for, say, let's say Garcia and Pierce, I don't recall seeing anyone coming to a citizens communication event or activity or opportunity that represented the majority population attending those schools. So I can't say in good conscience that half a dozen people representing the minority population of the students who are attending those schools speak for the entire community. And, you know, I'm sorry if I offend anyone by making that statement, but I think it's time to, if we're going to keep the main thing, then let's talk about what it is. And so, you know, and I agree with Miss Bradley. You know, we have got to do something different in those schools. Those children deserve as high quality an education as any other child in this district. And I can't explain exactly what's happening over there that's causing the low scores, but we certainly have to find whatever it is that will engage those children and energize them to learn. And because I know they can, there's no doubt in my mind. So we have to do something. Now, what the answer is, I don't know. That's what, you know, all of you guys are, and that's why y'all get paid the big bucks, you know, to help us figure that out and to meet the needs of our kids. So, period on that. Mr. Williams, I was going to say Waxler. I have a question. I read something over the weekend in a community newspaper. It's related to one of the other items, one of the other AAFRs. It's in our notebook, but I don't know if it's appropriate to bring it up.
Is it about, I think we're only posted for the agenda for these
those
two.
two.
Right, so if it's another AFR, that's not for tonight's discussion.
Then I'll just mention it to the superintendent, and she can take care of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr.
Now
Sutton?
I have a question,
Yeah.
Mr. Williams. Yeah, but I think it's a similar thing. I read something about this programming regarding another AAFR that I don't think is true. Can I correct that?
I'm going to
It's
suggest you
about
talk to me,
this.
because I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but I want you to be careful, because we don't go out. If it's about these two topics,
Yes,
in single gender in this District
Yes.
1.
and where
or
it's
this-
going.
Because this is an administrative question, this isn't a board question.
Oh, it was just more, can I talk about it? Can I make a clarifying statement?
I don't see Chris out there.
Yes.
Oh, I thought she was over there. I didn't see her.
Yes, is where I read something saying where it was going to go. Someone's. Okay. So, yeah, so I'm not going to talk about the other one, but I know that, and again, I know sometimes quotes are, having been in that situation myself, quotes aren't always accurately represented in print sometimes. But I did read where a staff member was quoted saying that the school for young men was potentially going to be considered for the South High School. And I just want to say, for the record, I know that was in a community newspaper, that isn't true, and we haven't considered that at all. So, you know, it may have been a misquote or something, but I did get some questions about that, and I just want to say that I know so far in our planning, that's never been discussed.
Okay, I think that's on topic. About in terms of potential locations for the School for Young Men, you're saying the South High School is not one of those locations
Right.
you've considered. Okay, but that's on the top related to the School for Young Men.
Okay, I just want to clear that up.
Okay, other questions or comments? Mr. Torres?
I guess I see one comment that maybe you didn't mean it like this, maybe I misheard it, Dr. Kerstarfin, but you seem to indicate that we were considering these both because you can't separate one from the other. And I guess in my mind, we're really looking at two different, not even options, but two different needs that we're trying to address. And so in my mind, I want to make, to me, the school for young men that is comparable to the Ann Richards School, sort of the leadership school, is one thing. And to me, it's like, I think we need to consider that, and if we can fund it, if we can achieve what the funder wants to satisfy those requirements, I'm supportive of that. I look at the District 1 issue, and that's a totally different issue. And the way I sort of draw the analogies, it's kind of like saying, are we going to have a LASA school, and are we going to have another school that focuses on the needs of children in a particular area? And just the fact that they're both single-sex schools, to me, is irrelevant. And so, to me, it's pretty clear that I think we have an opportunity to go down the path of the School for Young Men Leaders, and we pursue that. Once again, assuming that it's your recommendation that we pursue it from an academic standpoint, the Moody thing, as Ms. Moya refers to it. But I think the issue related to District 1 and the school and the programming that we're doing there is addressing a different need in the district. And just as we have 115 different campuses and we have such diversity in 87,000 students, I think there are two different options that, in my mind, are different. So I just wanted to say that I know they're being brought together to us as sort of one AFR bundle, but I really see them differently.
I agree.
Okay.
I thought I said that, and that there's a big difference between these two designs. My only point for raising it is that other people ask questions like, well, why can't the Moody thing be the District 1 thing? You know, I mean, so I think depending on just your perspective and where your questions are, I mean, even Robert just said, he was like, what does this mean? We have 3 additional designs or 3 additional single-sex plus another one? So while you're right, and I see the reason, we ended up on these 2 paths for totally different reasons, and they are very different designs, and I agree with that. And there are people that still have questions that as they've explained to me, that they need answers so they can separate them too. Or in some cases, some people are still asking me to pull them together. So, you know, so it's just.
And to those people, I would say they don't understand the schools because they serve 2 totally different programmatic needs that we have in this district. And I would want to make sure that they realize that it's not we're picking an option that is the best of the 3 options or whatever, is we have 2 different needs that we're trying to fulfill.
Fair enough. And we will, you know, walk out with that kind of clarity that helps us knowing if that's how y'all see it. The other thing that we discussed, all right, so given what you just said, I'm just going to stir the mud a little.
Barksdale.
Oh, okay. So here's one of the things about the co-location, right? There was a question.
Okay, hold on, just make sure we're clear, right? So the co-locate, when you talk about, are you on the School for Young Men, or are you on the District 1 schools?
I'm in the middle in the mud.
Well,
Because in order to talk about the co-location, I've got to talk about one of those sites, which could be Pierce or Garcia.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. So here's one thing. So the question was asked in one of the work meetings, I can't remember which one, you know, what happens, let's say that, you know, ALC isn't a possibility for lots of, whatever the reasons end up being, and you ended up doing something in a co-location. Does that mean that you would have to close the school immediately, end that programming, send everybody out, like, but, because we're talking about 13, 14, and that was one of the concerns that, that some folks had. So we brought that, to the Moody Foundation and others and said, what are the options here? Can we kind of talk through this? And the answer was that if we did do a co-location that would involve some reassignment of students, that they certainly were willing to work with the district to allow for like up to a 3-year to allow the middle school to transition out, even if the kids wanted to go to, like if it's like the boys of that school wanted to go to the Moody's school, the Moody's design, the School for Young Men. So they would, try to help with the transition and certainly allow kids from that neighborhood that may not meet the application process, the application criteria, to be able to attend that school. So, again, that could be any of those sites we mentioned, or none of them. But I just thought I would raise that as part of a transition consideration if the cost of renovation and things of that sort we're not going to be considered for the design. But we've been trying to like keep buckets of things as we go through to see how those things would play out.
And just one last comment with regard to the fault, and I'm sure if Mr. The fault mode, if Mr. Shaw will put his retirement plan on that fault line, I'm more than happy to support that. But just remember, a fault line is sort of like a contributing tributary. It isn't sort of like just on the line. If it happens, it's going to have an effect that is much wider than just the line. So.
Thank you. I think I was just referred to, and I'm including myself and people who may be confused about our AAFRs in terms of the intent of the Moody single-sex school, single-gender school, and the District 1 single-gender schools. My understanding for the vision of the District 1 single-district schools is to deliver the same rigor and benefits of single-gender education to kids in District 1 on an attendance zone basis that young men would in a Moody design young men's school or young women do get at the Ann Richards School for Young Women Leaders. So when we're talking about particular needs of particular kids in a particular district, my understanding of the vision for the school is to meet the meet the expectation of having high expectations for all kids. And even so, kids don't have to go through an application process to go to this attendance zone-driven single-gender school. And that's the primary difference between that one and the choice schools like Ann Richards or like the Moody Foundation School. With the overlay, with the academic overlay, of course, of the benefits of single-gender education, of feeding into their vertical team, of being ready to go to the college prep schools that they would feed into. So with this notion that I'm not familiar with the particular needs for the kids, I'd like to hear more about that, but that's the vision as I understand it, which is access, addressing equity to a school like Ann Richards for kids who don't meet the application process, but the same exact rigor is in place in their neighborhood school. Do I misunderstand that? Okay. Maybe perhaps Trustee Torres is saying that.
To me, it's completely different because it's just like LASA, and where you have a limited number of students that can attend one, and the other one is a neighborhood school, and there is no application per se. To me, that's fundamentally different in terms of who can actually access the school, as you're putting it, because in one, you're going to, just like LASA, there's a limited number of seats, and those who make it, and those that don't. And we draw from the entire district. In the other, you're guaranteed a seat. That's fundamentally different to me.
Yeah, they're fundamentally different in the application process. But as I understand the vision for where these schools may be in 5 years or so, it is the same kids that are applying to and getting into the Ann Richards School, or perhaps the Moody School in the future would be the same kids. They're just going to an attendance-driven school. Like, to me, the LASA LBJ, I get the application difference and getting into LASA difference between that and LBJ, but again, for the vision for these schools and how they would track with other single-gender schools in the district, I think academically what the expectation is it would be the same.
The academic expectation.
I mean, no,
is the
just,
same?
just like LASA offers a different level, a different type of, has different type of course offerings in the school where it's co-located. It's a magnet school, it's different, it's
But-
different than LBJ.
And I guess the programming to me would be different in the sense that the children coming into one school that may not have the same level of preparedness for the school as the other would. So you would want your academic programming to be able to take those kids and look at them and see what are their needs that are different. Whereas once again with a LASA type school, you know what minimum.
Yeah.
And so the program is different because of the children's preparedness that are coming in. And to me, the whole point of the District 1 school is we know we want to provide support to these kids, and we're not sure that they're all going to be coming in at the same level.
Yes, and I just think I'll put just the final point on it, but I guess I'm talking about the vision, again, 5-10 years from now. It's that, okay, well, I mean, just for why we would be doing this, if the board moves forward with this, why we would be doing it, it'll be offering rigorous single-gender education like we have with the Ann Richard School, ultimately. I don't know why we want anything different. That is my take on it. I'll leave it at that.
Just one other piece as far as student outcomes is that for the 6 through 12, the Moody School, one of the expectations of the planning team is that students actually graduate from the school having earned college credit. Pearson Garcia obviously is a middle school. So yes, they could earn high school credit. So as far as when we start to take the fine line, as the superintendent has mentioned, when we provide the more detail on the designs, there are differences in the student outcomes. And that's one that I can pick up that is very different, that kids actually would sign up for. Say, well, this is going to be part of the requirement. You must graduate having earned college credit. Now, the team hasn't come together to determine what number of college credit hours would be necessary to complete that program, but that's just one difference I can think of simply because of the grade configuration. But there are others, since we're using the model of Urban College Prep for the School for Young Men, which is based on 4 specific arcs around that support student learning.
Okay, if I may ask a question based on that. So the kids from the single-gender schools, as they're conceived right now in District 1, wouldn't they matriculate to high school programs that would have eventually have the same some college credit requirement?
They would, and now that's with early college high school, which is
Yeah.
a different design.
A different design, but
And
student
actually,
outcomes.
certainly, because there they can have the opportunity up to 60 college credit hours. But that's already specified in the early college high school design. I was just trying to articulate some differences that within an umbrella, absolutely, you're right. But they are specific. They are, when we delineate differences, they do exist in the actual student outcome.
Yeah. Okay.
Ms. Bradley.
I'm just going to give an example. I had someone from one of the Pierce Garcia, I'm not going to mention which school, which are feed into the college, early college start. And the person who was telling me this was very excited, and they may be watching now, and they were saying that they at least prepared 70 to 80 students to be college ready or be able to start in the early college high school program at LBJ. 70 to 80 students out of, I don't know the number of the 8th graders. Now, they were very proud of that. Now, and I was glad that they were proud of that. Now, it didn't impress me much because I want all of the 8th graders to be prepared to take on that rigorous program. I want all of them to go through it, leaving with college credit, at least 60, up to 60 hours to pay for their first or second year of college. When I look at these two programs, I see basically some of what I hear Mr. Torres saying, preparing these children to be ready to meet that rigorous program. I was listening to something that was being said at TASB that a lot of our boys drop out at 9th grade, and a lot of it, they drop out of algebra. Most of them can't meet the reading standards. So what if we can use middle school, that gap, we close the gap right there so that when they go into high school, they're able to, in fact, hopefully they will have had Algebra 1 in middle school, and they're going straight into geometry in 9th grade. And they're going into high school reading not on grade level, but above grade level. That they're going in high school having to at least touch on what their God-given talent is. Some of our kids go through high school having that can draw and never pick up a pencil, that can sing and are not in choir, that are athletic and not outside. What if they can touch on all of that in middle school so that when they go to high school, they're engaged, they're not dropping out, they're part of something? What if they go to high school, our boys, with leadership abilities, character skills, conflict resolution, knowing that if they get into some type of a conflict that they don't have to use their fists, they can actually verbalize their way through it. Don't even have to fight. Or if they see something happening on a campus where it looks like it may turn into an altercation, that they can actually mediate it themselves. That's what I'm talking about here. Because I can tell you, when the Moody School opened, these children won't go. Because the criteria is going to be like Ann Richards. And the kids that we know need this type of setting, and a lot of it is the academic program, but then just the setting, just the ambiance of just the setting. So what if we can create something for children that in some cases, not all of them, but some of them, society has tossed away, and just actually get that light bulb to come on early so that when they get to LBJ and Reagan, they are ready. And teachers are not doing remediation, but actually educating kids on the level that they should be on when they get there. That's all I want to see. I could care less about the rest of the nonsense that researchers have come up with the single genders and single bias, single sex bias. I don't care about none of that. That has nothing to do with any of this. I don't care. You're laughing. Honestly, I don't care. I don't. I just want our boys to go to school on a pathway to come into being strong young men. Our girls to become strong young ladies. No teen pregnancy, no drug, none of that. That's all. Not even touching ISS, going to alternative learning center, any of that. In fact, I want us to be able to do away with it at those schools. SRO officers, even though I love them, we won't even need an SRO officer in these schools. That's all I want. I don't think I'm asking for much.
Other questions, comments? Mr. Schneider?
Well, Dr. Kroshoffen, for me, it gets back to the academics that we're expecting out of this. And when I say business case, that's what I mean by business case. I want to see how this is going to improve the academics for all three of the potentials that we're talking about, whether we do 0, we do 3. I mean, to me, it's how we're moving forward kids academically. And the one thing I do want to respond to is, I hear this frequently, not just tonight, but frequently, that we need to change things because what we're doing isn't working. And, I would agree that what we're doing is not working, but I think we really need to be careful about what we change things to. And my concern is that, at least for me, there needs to be a deeper level of scrutiny applied to things to get me to that point where we're doing it efficiently within the budget that we've got and we're moving kids forward academically. So, that's the kind of data that I'm looking for and would like to see.
Okay, other comments or questions? Okay, let me give a couple. Actually, I agree with Mr. Torres on the different pieces, so I'm going to, if I can, tackle School for Young Men. I know we've had a lot of community involvement. We've had a task force. We had one when Dr. Forgeon was here. We've had a long history of people wanting to have a school for young men ever since we first came up with the School for Young Women in the Ann Richards School. I think from an equity standpoint, we need to have one that's similar. I think we've got a funder willing to support it. I think when you look at kind of the proposal, and I know cost is an issue, the Alternative Learning Center seems like the best site because it's not taking another school, it's not taking another location. It seems like it's a good thought. I know that there's some analysis that needs to get done on the cost. And suggesting, Dr. Starfman, maybe we can even look at outside to get one level of scrutiny to figure out what the cost would actually be to phase it in, some level, not a full design, but what's it really going to cost and how do we pay for it? If we're going to do a 13 bond, the timing is right to do this. If the public supports it, then it makes it clear. If the public says no, then maybe there's not public support for it. But I think it'll be a great indicator of whether the public supports it. And I think it provides an opportunity to utilize a facility that's significant, a piece of land, maybe not the facility itself as currently designed, that is significantly underutilized. And getting that up to a place that we can actually create a program that can meet the needs of a lot of kids, I think is an opportunity that we ought to at least explore in more depth. With respect to District 1 schools, in the single gender, I'm going to actually take it at a different angle, which is I think what I heard people talking about, and I'm even looking at stuff, is like what are the things that make a high-quality program? And this is true for all of our schools, and it's what are the components, and it's the academic curriculum, the teachers, the parental involvement, what are all those pieces? And when I think about the early college high schools that we already have in place there, is it possible to make early college middle schools that are actually aligned with the early college high school, that actually have all the programmatic stuff, the leadership stuff? And then the question is there an additional benefit to making those single gender? But it sounds like we're leading with the gender, at least the way the conversation seems to be getting to me, and not leading with the programmatic stuff that we could do to benefit.
Mr. Williams, Pierce is the Pierce Early College, help me with the name.
Prep.
And Garcia is what? The same. So we already started.
Right.
That's the vertical alignment. But I believe that it takes more in those two communities. That's my belief. And I think I've already challenged you to drive those communities. So we can sit up here and talk about teachers and so forth and so forth. We all know that you can put the program in, but if you don't have the right staff, it's not going to work. If you don't have a strong leader, it's not going to work. So we already know that. But something else needs to change.
Right. So I guess I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think I heard you talk about all the program and all the things you wanted, and I'm trying to get to and say, okay, all those programming things, I think we can say this is what we want, and then I think what we need to decide as a board is how important is the single gender to that? Because it sounds like the way at least I hear it get presented is that the single gender drives all the programmatic stuff. If we have this, we'll have these leadership programs. And I'm saying I think what we're saying is that we already have effort, these early college prep, which are relatively new, aligned to the early college high schools. Have we done all we can programmatically to make sure that we beat those up? And then can we say the programs are in place, the early college high school alignment at the middle school level, and then the discussion really is, do we go single gender or not? But I think the way at least I'm hearing it, and maybe not right, is that sometimes the single gender then drives some additional programming. And I realize there might be some, but I'm not sure I understand the difference between what's driven solely by the decision to go single gender or not versus something else. And so if it's here are all the programmatic things that we're putting in place, there's an additional investment at Pierce, these are the givens that we're trying to do at Pierce and Garcia, and then here's the decision the board we need to make is, do you want those single gender or not, and what are the pros and cons of that? I'm probably, when we start talking about, Mr. Talk about all the business cases, I'm actually not as concerned about getting a business case in great depth about every single possible option, because I think it's not realistic to ask you all to do that. I think we got to find out other options that are off the table or on the table, and the ones that then are on the table, I think need a more substantive business case. Much, you don't have enough hours in the day to prepare business cases for every possible option, particularly if it's not viable and people aren't interested. To me, I'm just one voice, but it seems like the option that we're looking at is what's it going to take to make the aligned programming for the two middle schools to align to the early college high school with early college middle school, college prep type of programming. What's missing? If there's anything missing, maybe it's got everything it needs to have. And then the trigger is, should those go single gender, and what are the pros and cons of that? And how does it make it better than being co-ed? For me, and I don't know that I'm as big a supporter, just as me, of putting one of the schools being kind of half single gender in each side of the wing, and then the other one being completely co-ed, because you're really talking about co-ed, I mean single gender classroom kind of environment, not necessarily single gender schools. But I think if you can make the trigger that says, if we do all this other stuff, what is it, the additional bump that's going to come from the single gender decision on the middle school, because all this other stuff's a given, and it's aligned to that, and how much time we need to take at work. And I know I mentioned to Ms. Bradley the other day, so actually went to the CIS, I guess, site visit at Pierce on Thursday, Friday, I forget which day it was. And they were doing some incredible work with kids, but they've got more kids to serve than they have to serve. And a lot of this, we can talk about programming, but when you listen to 7 kids that talk about some of the social challenges that they're coming to school with, there are some really significant needs that just the teacher and the curriculum aren't going to address. And so how do we beef up the social service supports that those schools need, with either internally with our own capacity or you partnering with outside organizations to help those kids get what they need so they can come to school healthy, fit, and ready to learn every single day. And a lot of those kids have a lot of challenges that CIS and other social service programs provide, and some of the decisions that come with time and after school and activities. So to me, it's what do we take to get those schools where we want them to be, and then what's the trigger point for this single gender? And then the third variable to me is there something that says, back to the budget, that this is what we'd want in a perfect world. We just don't have the money, or we don't have the capacity utilization, so therefore we've got to do something different than we'd really prefer to do if resources were unlimited and we were okay with underutilizing facilities. And I think that's then causes this. But to me, just to me, I'd rather have the School for Young Men at the existing Alternative Learning Center facility where we're not disrupting existing campuses, school of choice, people come. It's the brother school to the Ann Richards sister school. And then we, again, state the we make District 1 schools deal with the entire vertical alignment to the 2 high schools, and then we come up and make the case for what's the trigger between why it makes more sense to go single gender versus leave those co-ed, and what are the additional things that we would need to do. Ms. Moya.
Well, I like what you said, but I think we've already hit the trigger, because those middle schools are already, early college, prep to feed into those early college high schools. And we are academically challenged over there. We do have some issues. And so I really think we've already hit the trigger that says, okay, that it's time to deal with those other issues that are influencing or affecting their academic day. And if converting to single gender can take some of those issues away, so that those children can concentrate and be academically successful during the day and improve some of their skills for life, then I think by the time they get to high school, they'll be even more successful. I mean, I'm just thinking that based on what you were saying, it feels like we've already hit the trigger.
And I would say, because I think the early college high schools are pretty new, the early college middle schools are pretty new. So to me, the trigger would say, do we have really given these things enough time, and do we have full implementation of all of the programming that an early college middle school, or even the single gender middle schools would have, that we want to have? If we do, then you're right, then we're at the trigger. If we haven't, then it seems like, are we really at the trigger or not? Because I think some of the triggering, talking about the years and the challenges, is there's a new design for that vertical team. Is it fully implemented? How well is it working? And again, if you're there, Lori, if that's where it is okay, so we've done everything we need to do, and we're still having performance, and then here's why we think single gender, and this is what I would expect the administration to come back with, is here why you think single gender would be better than co-ed, and here's where the lift would be, and here's where the challenges would be. And then it comes back to what's the community support, and it's not going to be unanimous. That's okay. I mean, I think you've done a tremendous amount of input. I think it's pretty clear it's going to be a mixed feeling. The board's going to have to decide if single gender is a recommendation. Where do they want to shake out? I mean, I don't know that there's going to be magic happening from 20 other meetings that all of a sudden everyone who's opposed is going to be convinced, or everyone who's for it's all of a sudden be against it. I think we're going to have a mixed reaction for it. But I think the case has got to be made that says, why is the single gender decision the right one? Maybe to your point, why is it now versus a year from now? Ms. Bradley.
Right now, I feel like I'm a litigator, because I feel like I'm arguing the point of why I feel that that these two schools are necessary, but it's really interesting. We're not questioning why the Young Men Leadership Academy is necessary, because we're not in conflict with Title IX, none whatsoever. And I think Mr. Waxler could attest to that we're not. So nobody is fighting the point of why we need the young. Nobody has asked about empirical data of why we need the Young Men's Leadership Academy. Nobody. But yet and still, we're going to sit up here and try to come to a trigger point on why we need this. And we have data that can say that. So it's just really interesting to me why we have to prove ourselves with this particular issue, and especially with the fact that most of these children are of color. So it's just interesting why we have to do that. To me, you have to provide a setting that's even conducive to learning. Now, if somebody can tell me Pearson Garcia has had that, I'll be willing to drop the point, because I haven't heard that from staff or parents. And I've heard that overwhelmingly.
So let me take a shot, because I think part of, and I think those of you who've done the research, the single-gender middle schools that I think y'all went and looked at, the ones, why do we have to have the school for young men? I don't think it's a Title IX issue. There's different types of equity, right? There's a community, there's demand, there's people that have an interest, there's people who've been on task force for 2 different times to do it. And I think the evidence that y'all saw was the single-gender schools, boys or girls, that y'all looked at were primarily schools of choice, and they were primarily, if not exclusively, schools of choice. And I think Dr. Starfin said that last time, and those that were successful. The question, I think, we're blazing new ground, creating an attendance-zone-driven, single-gender middle school that doesn't feed into a single-gender high school. I mean, it doesn't mean it may not work, but I don't think there's evidence that says this is a proven model. I think we're basing it a little bit on the belief that it'll work, because it's got some elements, but it's not like we can point to this model, this design, I think, in too many places in the country that say this exists. So I think the proof is not that we don't need to do something different. I think the proof is, why is this the something different we need to do? And is it because we think it's different? And I think the question then is, can Dr. Starfin make the case that said this is why she believes single-gender middle schools make sense? And this is why the benefit would be above the co-ed school, at least for me. Others may not need that or agree with that. Ms. Parks, Dr. Stark.
I think Ms. Bradley made the point I was trying to make earlier, much more articulately, in a much more articulate way, which was, and maybe you did too, in that it feels like the district, and maybe you've brought up some key differentiators there, Ms. Williams, because it feels like the district has pulled the trigger on single-gender education with Ann Richards and with exploring the Moody School. And I guess, and you point out key differentiators, which could be matriculation to moving on to high school, where where it's vertically aligned. But my understanding is that would be the design of the middle schools. It wouldn't be single-gender, but it would be aligned academically with the schools where the kids would then feed into. But I think you were raising a point that it isn't an exact model of like Ann Richards or the Moody School, because the kids then don't go on to the single-gender high school. Is that one of the?
That's one of them.
One of the key differentiators. Yeah, because maybe to Lori's point, maybe to your point, it feels like the trigger has been pulled. We've pursued this with Ann Richards and maybe the Moody School, with that AAFR that's on the table. So, yeah, perhaps that's part of the case, is the differentiator between the successful model that we have in place now. And again, as I understood it, as this was first discussed, it would be presenting the same exact benefits of a school like Ann Richards, but in an attendance zone fashion. And of course, I think I expressed during the IDEA conversation with that last AAFR that I am challenged with forcing people through one school or choosing another school. And that's just something I have, but there's not an option where that could be made different to work. But I do feel like the district has already pulled the trigger on the value of single-gender education. And again, to your point, I understand that doesn't include the high school component, but I kind of feel like we've crossed that bridge.
I thought the other difference, Dr. Stark, the other difference is the school of choice. I mean, the schools that you look at across the country that are single-gender are schools of choice. They're not attendance-zone-driven, assignment-based, single-gender schools that are middle schools that feed into a co-ed high school. There's just no evidence, I think, of that design. Doesn't mean it won't work. Doesn't mean it's not a great idea. Doesn't mean it won't be a huge benefit. But I think we have to kind of make our own case, because there's not external evidence that indicates that we're following design. So I don't think it's the same as Ann Richards or Moody, because it's actually a different
And it is a disparate design, I agree with that, and that's the point that I raised during the idea AAFR conversation, when the model that worked for the Valley may perhaps not work here, because in the Valley was a school of choice, here it isn't. This board was able to overcome that with that discussion, and perhaps it'll be something we talk about more with regard to this AAFR.
Dr. Stephan.
Yeah, so a couple of things. Yesenia and Paul, and I know some of the planning team members are out there. So I know
Planning
that
team, the planning for the School for Young Men, or
both
schools?
Yesenia, we got the two are here, and I know some of the members are out there. For both, though, we need to pull, especially for the School for Young Men, because I know the schedule was getting a little lighter. But they need to get together to talk about the business case piece. People need to go back and review all the latest things we have on budget, right? They're going to be doing work leading up to the 8th, so we'll have new, fresh numbers. Yesenia, can you hear me? Okay. And then those, I just call them the Mark Williams questions. We keep a list after the end of every, but the other ones too. But we need to bring closure to that too, and all the other ones. But y'all got the list. But let's just, y'all need to get together and really kind of go through all this stuff one more time. Okay. So
Let me say, we don't have to make a decision tonight, right? This is a
No,
discussion.
no.
So I know it feels like probably we're trying to get to some finality. We don't have to. We're not making. It's not going to be a proposal to a recommendation from the superintendent for another month. So part of it is going to be just giving feedback, and then we'll take the next step in the next discussion. Ms. Moya.
Thank you. I just want to make one small comment. Keep in mind that when we talk about our single gender school, the Ann Richards School, remember that not every girl who goes through middle school stays at Ann Richards for high school. There are some, I couldn't tell you the number, but there are some that when they go into 9th grade, choose to leave Ann Richards and the single gender environment to go into a co-ed environment. Now, like I said, I don't know how many there are, but I do know that it happens. And so the issue of the students going from single gender middle school to a co-ed high school doesn't worry me very much at all, because I think that they'll be prepared whichever way they choose to go. If they choose to go that way, or they choose to apply to, the young men's school or the young women's academy, they can choose to apply too, because those classes don't stay full forever, all the way through high school. So I just don't feel like, for me personally, I don't think that's a real big concern, but unless somebody can tell me otherwise, I'm just not convinced that that's, I understand what you're saying, but I'm just not convinced that that's a reason to not go this way for the benefit of those kids right now in middle school.
So just put this on your to-do list. Is Ms. Moy raised another topic, I think, which is, are you going to allow 8th graders from the single gender District 1 schools, if it happens, to apply to Ann Richards? Because I don't think historically there's not been kids coming in high school. So and I don't know how many spots there are. So it's figuring out how many spots there are, because if 50% of them want to go, there may be 5 slots. So
I realize that, but what I'm saying is, I don't even know if anybody's applying at the high school level to go in to start brand new, and I just don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. They have to meet that criteria, right? They have to be at a certain level of the SAT, and they have to be here and there and everywhere, to even consider applying.
I'm just saying, but I think your proposal was that some of the kids may choose to go with co-ed, and some of the kids may want to go soon. Right. So you got a question is, do we even allow that? How would that factor in? Mr. Snyder.
Just sort of a related data question. If on the Richards case, I think I know what the numbers are, but I'd rather know what the numbers are. If you look at the 6th grade class when it opened, what does it look like now in terms of kids that have gone back to the comprehensive high school? So.
It's a data request.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just.
Okay. It is 115, just because we use the same model. At 115,
I think about 2 and 3
it's about 140 now.
Yeah, right. But as I said, I'd rather know the numbers.
Okay. And one more data request just for you guys. You guys showed middle school capacity. And there was at one point a slide, particularly for the schools that are affected, where how many kids are in the attendance zone today versus how many kids are actually membership there. You don't have to get, but just sort of let us know so we can figure out, and for all, maybe it's just for all the middle schools, because there's some mix of that attendance zone versus there, and then figuring out what the transfer, and then as you look, one thing was you look at 11, 12 versus your 12, 13 enrollment, unless there's something missing, I'm guessing there's some pretty major deltas between last year and this year by school, like hundreds of kids different, which doesn't seem right. So I'm thinking that maybe the Keeling numbers aren't reflective of the kids that the other attendance zones haven't gotten pulled out, or something's not. Just take a look at your page 28, 11, 12 to 12, 13 data, because something doesn't look right between year to year. Okay.
Well, all right.
Thank you.
Well, we changed grade levels those years.
Can I expand that little request that you
Sure.
just made? We used to get a chart that had the middle schools across the top horizontal axis and down the left, and it would tell us which students from which. Can we have this for this?
Which
Because I
students
think
from which?
We used to get it for all school levels.
Is it?
It's a matrix that shows by school and says where they live versus where they go to school.
In and out.
Okay.
But I think y'all do it. You've had it prepared. Yeah, just if you already got it, just
Okay.
send it to us.
Send it again.
And I'd say middle and high school probably, particularly of interest as it relates to the vertical patterns here.
Yeah, that's what.
But if you've already got it, you've already shared it, just
Okay.
zip it to
We'll
us.
send it again.
Okay, Ms. Bradley.
Dr. Christopher, we had talked, because I heard that Dr. Thomas, who's sitting out there, she said, uh-oh, maybe bringing Dr. Jawanza Kanjufa, and that I was hoping that we would have an opportunity as a board to hear him. He is an expert on this field, and that we could also ask questions of him. And then also that he could also speak with the planning committee as well.
Right, so, Ms. Bradley, yes, we know that he's going to be in the Austin area. I just saw the proposal from Yesenia and everyone today, trying to get him here, just working with his staff to see if it's possible. And I know I know you're working, I know they've been on top of it. So we'll let y'all know ASAP. But I'm certain I saw that today and turned it around to get to him even today.
Okay, and that's working with Dr. Thomas, because I think she's already bringing him in.
Dr.
right?
Thomas and Yesenia and
Okay.
everybody is working together.
All right, thank you.
We're on it.
Good suggestion. Okay, anything else on this topic? Okay, that's going to conclude this topic and conclude the televised portion of our meeting this evening. Thank you all very much. We do have an executive session to go to. We also have one agenda item that is the board dialogue thing, which it says 30 minutes. I'm going to say basically give you a 2 minutes update, and then we can talk about it later, is we've asked the TASB folks to take a look at the handbook that's been put together, and they're going to help pull all that together and look at the other reference materials that they might have, and then we'll have some more substance to bring back to everybody. But they've actually helped, but they had to finish the convention this week, and so that's going to be more of an effort for them this week. But as soon as they get that done, we'll bring it back, and you guys can see what we're looking at.